During the show today, we will be talking about the issues of mental health, specifically with regards to depression. We will be having a couple guests here today to give us a variety of perspectives, as they have all been affected by depression in one way or another. And the main purpose of the show is to help shine some light on this important subject. So our first guest here today is Rashad Eady. Hello, Rashad.
Thank you for having me.
So I think we should start with the existential question. What is depression, and how does it affect people physically and mentally?
So if we're talking about depression itself, according to what's called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, we're on the 5th edition. Depression is extreme sadness with a point of 6 weeks or longer. So this would be not just the typical sadness, this is anguish. You can have actual physical pain, so much loss of energy, loss of drive, loss of things that you once found interesting. So this could be if you were a video gamer where you once loved to play video games and now you're at the point where that doesn't even interest you no more, as well as just severe down moods.
Oh, okay. So does it make a person chemically imbalanced, or?
So the actual concept behind it is a chemical imbalance in your brain that's supposed to have decrease and change your endorphins, which are the basic chemicals that regulate your emotions. And with this particular one itself, it makes it where it's a little bit more or less improbable to actually feel joy itself. So it's the lack of joy. So it's kind of like taking all the joy you would have had or things you could have had in the world, taken away, and just only feeling the opposite, only feeling that negative side of life, to the point where you feel hopeless and helpless.
So what could be the consequences of such a feeling?
What do you mean by consequences?
Consequences of depression. I mean, how do people respond to it?
So when it comes to people, each person is a little bit different, especially because it's kind of classified on something called the biopsychosocial model, or biological, social, or environment, and then your environment. So with each person, they have different symptoms and they feel it differently. So if we just went through gender lines, a lot of guys focused with depression are more angry, more vengeful, a little bit more angry because they don't know how to express their feelings in a valid way. When it comes to most females, on the average, this is just a generalization, is of course different for each person, but they feel more of the down mood, more of the I can't get up. You physically will not or cannot or potentially have the ability to not be able to leave your bed. And it's a real concept. It's not where you can just, eventually get up and start feeling better. Since it is that chemical imbalance, it's not something that can just be fixed by working it out or just hoping it would get better. Usually it does. The only ways to truly usually help it is, talk therapy, medication, or some form of counseling to help you realize what are some of your triggers and realize what are some of the things that put you into that mood and coping strategies to get out of that mood, or just to help you while you're in that mood.
So what exactly are triggers?
So when we talk about triggers, triggers are identifying markers that may cause something to happen. For example, a trigger for depression could be grief. Someone dies in your family, that could be a major trigger. Or it could be something as simple as nothing. So when it comes to depression, it doesn't always have to have a trigger. It can just come on, because since it is a chronic illness, that's not something that's curable. It's consistent and constant. So my trigger literally could be just waking up in the morning. It could be just putting on my clothes. It could be any concept that will start the negative emotions to surge into who I am.
So is there a correlation? Is it like a genetic problem that?
So it does have a genetic component. So remember when we did talk about the biological component, with depression specifically, one of the key risk factors or triggers can be having someone in your family that has it. So mother, grandmother, father, brother, that can be that direct biological component, which increases your likelihood of getting depression or actually being diagnosed with depression.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to get an idea of the scope of the issue. So how many people currently in the United States are affected by depression?
So if we want to talk about youth specifically, the ages of 16 to about 24 is 1 in 4. So 1 in 4 people in that age range will or are experiencing depression symptoms. When we talk about the general population, including the older adults, it's 1 in 5, at the same as the number of people that will actually get a mental health challenge in a lifetime.
Oh, okay. So how many people, so people experience it 1 in 4 for some people, and
For youth specifically.
why is there such a disparity between, for example, you mentioned women and men, right? Why is there a disparity between, your certain gender, for example, on why you experience higher rates of depression?
So if you want to go by my opinion and a lot of people in mental health, it's really not a difference, but the only real difference is one side is more likely to seek help and get help for it. So usually when it comes to females, they're more likely to try to get the help and try to fix the problem, where guys, since they have that macho concept that they can sleep it off, or when you talk to your friends, just get over it, it's not that big of an issue, they kind of try to downplay until it may get to a point where they're no longer able to handle it. Instead of usually handle it in a crying fashion, it usually becomes an explosion of anger. So it doesn't seem like depression, even though it is still a symptom of depression.
Okay, so with regards to things like that, what is the best way then to cope with depression?
I can't give that answer because each person is different. So when I talk to a lot of my clients, each person does things in different ways. Some people, when they're starting to feel depressed, they have a good support system that allows them to get out of the bed, help them with the daily task, while other people may not have that support system, so they have to find their own individualized way of doing it. And when that kind of goes to you and who you are and how you can achieve things. Since one of the major problems with depression is isolation, a lot of times you don't even try to get help from the surrounding sources. So it's kind of hard to give you what can be done. It's for each person it will be different. Some people may read a book. Some people may get to, go out for a walk. Some people may have to take medication. Some people need to talk it out. So it all depends on the person.
So, but would the best course of action be talking with a doctor before any of that occurs?
Again, I can't give you that answer because each person, again, like I said, is different. And some people, the one-on-one with a counselor, doctor, or psychologist or psychiatrist does work very well. Where some people on the other end have no need or want to see a doctor. So they may try to go through some type of peer support. So some kind of support where other people that are currently undergoing through depression are helping each other with ways and things they can do to make themselves feel better.
Speaking of community, how impactful is the community? How impactful is the community towards? Sorry. Let's do that again. How much does your environment affect the rate of depression?
We can't just say that particular thing, but I can say how much it can trigger you or how much it can hurt you, since it is one part of what we did say, that biopsychosocial. That's that social environment. Your friends, your family, and how environment treats you, which can directly affect how you deal with the depression. In a lot of ways, society itself has such a strong stigma, which is a negative viewpoint when it comes to mental health as a whole. A lot of times society itself have negative impacts to someone trying to recover because of what they hear about people with depression, or what, the misconceptions and miseducation of, depression. A lot of people feel that they don't need to get help or don't want to get help because they're afraid of what the community says. But what we need to do a little bit more of is more acceptance, education, and understanding, so that when, as we said, 1 in 4, teens go through this, that means a large majority of teens go through it. If we can actually get rid of some of this stigma and educate more teens that actually need the help can actually get the appropriate help they need before it may be too late, or before something drastic happens to have to change their mind about getting help.
Wow, that is really, really insightful. Are there no specific factors, for example, like socioeconomic status, that make you a person more liable, more susceptible to this type of disease, or is there nothing like that?
Yes and no. Especially when we talk about SES, the socioeconomic status, that has a direct correlation with mental health because of the fact the more money you have, the more likely you are to get the appropriate resources faster, sooner, and deal with the problem at a higher level. When we talk about the people that aren't making enough to truly live off of course their disparities are going to be worse because they have extra factors that will increase the likelihood of getting depression, having depression, and not being able to deal with depression. if I don't believe I can afford it, if I don't have insurance, if I don't know where the proper resources are even in the first place, it's very likely that I won't be dealing with it until some major impact happens where maybe you get 5150'd, or maybe someone else outside of your direct family kind of sees that symptoms in you.
Do you believe then that there's a structural problem with the way this society deals with, depression affected persons?
100%. And it's in multi-layers because it's not just the facilities themselves, it's also society itself. When we look at the media, when we look at TV, when we look at TV shows, anytime you see depression or anytime you see any other mental health, it's either being made fun of or it's wildly exaggerated to look worse than it is so it can be, eventful. As well as when we look at the news, it's usually directly correlated to negative aspects of depression. We don't see how many people that are dealing with depression that are actually doing great and monumental things, like Halle Berry, or if we talk about like Michael Phelps. These people are having mental health challenges and doing great things. Bill Gates, one of the richest men alive, has been diagnosed with depression and he's still wildly successful, but we don't see those stories. Those stories aren't the stories that sell. We see the stories of somebody that had a mental health challenge that potentially did something violent.
So the media factors in a lot.
Yes.
In shaping our perception.
And then especially with the generation we are now, we are the phone generation, the YouTube generation, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, everything is directly seen through media. If we had more media related things coming out to help, it would help more people. There are certain organizations that do that. There's actually an organization in Oakland called Youth Radio, and their primary goal is to kind of do a little bit similar to what y'all are doing here, is to broadcast and reach out to youth and people in general to give them education about mental health, as well as organizations like NAMI, which is the National Alliance of Mental Illness, where their primary goal is to eradicate mental health stigma, so that through media, through one-on-one talks, just so people can understand the truth behind it instead of following the lies.
When we were talking about stigma earlier, you said that it was because they shaped it in a negative aspect that made people react so violently to it. Do you believe that people are being properly educated right now in the school system about this type of disease?
That's kind of funny because in most schools, if you talk to high school students or even talk to high school staff, how long, if you don't mind me asking, you in high school, how long was your mental health given in class?
As far as I remember, not at all.
Exactly. And because of this, not really trying to touch it because everybody's so afraid of mental health, everybody doesn't know what mental health, it's not really being taught at the level it should be. Most high schools may get one day for an hour of what is mental health, and that doesn't truly cover everything you need to know. You're missing monumental aspects of how people can get mental health challenges, what are mental health challenges, and what can be done to help them. They're not also given the resources. A lot of schools are lacking in resources to give, as well as don't understand even how to give resources. I talk to a lot of teachers, and they'll tell you they don't know when someone does come out with depression, they may say the wrong things, or they may not know how to truly come to them to give them the help they need. So it just becomes a failed cause. So if we could educate more students as well as the staff in the schools, I think the changes in the future would be evident.
So I thank you, Mr. Eady, for your time, for coming on this show. I believe this was very insightful. And yeah, thank you, sir.
Thank you for having me, man.
and welcome back to the Mental Health Show. As promised in the variety of perspectives, we have here two students, Mikaela and Shagun. So first I want to ask, to give a little context, what do you guys know about depression?
I'm Mikaela. I'm a junior at Gunn High School, and I've been more personally affected by depression instead of educationally, just because I've had close family members and friends that have suffered from depression.
What about you,
And
Shagun?
I'm a junior at Gunn, and I am part of the student wellness committee at our school. I have also not been personally affected by depression. I don't have it. However, I also know family members and friends who have suffered from mental illness. And as far as I know, depression is a mood disorder that can have a very prevalent role in a person's life. And it can manifest in many different ways. It has many different symptoms. And it can be hard for people to get out of bed, or like they lose interest in the stuff they're usually interested in. So, but I don't have any formal education in that subject.
So just to get a more personal insight, what do you guys think? What do you guys think are the factors that students have to deal with? The factors that create or even, even
Trigger depression.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. What do you guys think that? What do you guys think personally are the factors from what you've seen? The factors that trigger depression.
Well, I think there are a lot of different factors that play into depression. It can be environmental, situational. It could be a big event, or it could just be struggling with school. There are so many different factors that could play into depression, and
Have you seen any of these factors that play with other people?
personally, at the school I go to, Gunn High School, I've heard a lot from my peers that a lot of academic stress can factor into depression, and also personal and family issues has had a big factor on many of my friends.
Yeah. So I think it's kind of hard to put the what triggers depression into a box, because it really differs from person to person. While at our school, academic stress is certainly a factor that could play into a student's depression, is not necessarily the only one. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that people have about mental health, is that it's not really just one thing that causes depression. It's a multitude of things, and it can really differ from person to person. And often it's detrimental if someone kind of puts it in a box and says like, oh, it must be like only the academic stress that's causing your depression, because usually it's not just that. And if you do that, it's hard to get a full understanding of the person.
So from my understanding, and just to give a little context to the audience at home, there was an Atlantic article a couple months ago talking about, especially in the Palo Alto community, how many of these kids who live in affluent homes are committing suicide, mainly because they have become depressed about their life. And so I was wondering why you think depression is such a huge problem in this community. Why do you think it affects us in particular? Because no doubt, with the 3 suicides that we've had last year, the rates of depression must be higher here, right? So why do you think this community is more susceptible to depression?
Well, both me and Shagun write for the school newspaper, and I can't speak for Shagun, but I can speak for myself when I say that it was difficult to read that article from the Atlantic, just because I think it was very narrow-minded, and I think, again, as I said before, depression is really situational, and I think that as I said, I'm not an expert, and I haven't been fully educated on the subject. However, there is a chain reaction effect oftentimes as touched on in the Atlantic article, where suicides can come in waves, and one person's suicide can trigger another's. And so I think that focusing, like Shagun said before, on one aspect of one trigger and one cause of depression, like was written in the Atlantic, is a very narrow-minded thing to do, and there are many different triggers for depression, and just assuming that because someone lives in Palo Alto, their depression is triggered by academic stress is, in my opinion, extremely naive.
Well, there are other factors, right? Such as parental pressure, peer pressure, and other things like that. But what do you guys think is the most prominent factor? What do you guys think is a factor that stresses out families and students the most? Because from your own personal experiences.
Again, I don't think, at least I have the expertise to answer that question. It really differs from person to person. You can't just say like one thing, like there's not one major thing that can cause someone's depression. Like it can be like a family member's death, or like it can just be like going through everyday struggles. It's not, you just can't put it into a box. So it's hard to really point at one thing and say that is the cause of depression. And then, if you don't mind, if I can go back to the Atlantic article. So Mikaela mentioned we're both on the school paper. And we've had that discussion about the Atlantic article. Basically, we thought it was very sensationalist, which means that it was kind of glamorizing the issue a little bit. And I think those are exactly the things that cause chain reactions. And that has been something that's been proven, is that when there are articles that sensationalize suicide, like the Atlantic article, in my opinion, that those kinds of things are very likely to cause further suicides. And I do think that that might have been a problem in our community with the suicides that happened. I think there was a lot of sensationalism. So I don't think it has to do anything with like being in an affluent community. I think it more has to do with how people deal with this situation and opening up dialogue about mental health rather than glamorizing it, if that makes sense.
So do you guys believe that there are ways in which this community can help combat the onset of this disease?
I do. I think that having an open discussion about mental illness, and like Shagun said, not glamorizing suicide, is a very important area. Having an open discussion about mental health can, first of all, make depressed patients and depressed people feel like they have a support system, like people are opening up to understanding their depression and or their mental illness, and also just destigmatizing mental health and understanding that it is a real issue, because from my experience, mental health can often be seen as not as serious as physical health or a physical illness, and just destigmatizing that and really talking about, having an open discussion about how mental health is a real issue.
Do you, Shagun, believe that there is a strong stigma in this community, the Palo Alto community, about depression?
I think there's stigma everywhere, and so that would mean that there is stigma in Palo Alto. I do think that it has
What
gotten
specifically about the stigma?
Just like in society in general, I think it's like talking about mental health and opening up that dialogue, saying that it's okay for you to get help if you're struggling, and not saying like you can just deal with it on your own. And I think that Palo Alto has taken a lot of initiative in trying to break down that stigma with a lot of the programs that we've started with Rock and Sources of Strength and Student Wellness Community, specifically at Gunn High School. I think those have really helped in opening up dialogue about mental health. And I think although we're not there yet, we are on our way to breaking down the stigma around mental health.
So what is the wellness community and what does it do?
So the Student Wellness Committee was a committee started by Chloe Sorensen and Cole McFall. They are students at Gunn High School. It was in response to the tragedies that occurred last year. And basically the Student Wellness Committee aims to, just like I said, break down stigma surrounding mental health and just open up dialogue and mediums in which students can obtain mental health and be educated about it.
Is this a school-sponsored program?
It's a student-run program, yeah, at Gunn High
Student-run
School.
program. Oh, okay, so what are the various measures you guys are taking to help combat this disease?
So one of the first things we've done is create a refer a friend box. That's basically an anonymous way in which people, like students, if they know that one of their friends might be struggling, they can anonymously submit their name, and then that friend will be referred to a counselor. And then another thing we've done is start the Gunn Dialogue initiative. I think that's what it's called. And basically what that is we have alumni from Palo Alto High School and Gunn High School come in during school hours, and they talk about different, like they talk about redefining success and the different definitions of success, and they try to kind of broaden that.
So you're talking about opening up a dialogue. Is that because you guys believe that there's not enough of a dialogue currently happening about depression? What do you think, Mikaela?
I personally believe that Gunn, actually in comparison to other schools, is beginning to open up a dialogue just because of the tragedies that occurred last year. However, nationally in schools, I believe that there isn't enough dialogue, that, as I said before, depression is something that's sort of pushed away in a way. So I think that Gunn and the whole Palo Alto community is really taking steps to just really beginning to dig into what is depression and is there a cure for depression and how can we combat depression.
In your opinion, have there been enough steps taken? Can this school do more? Have there been any ineffective steps taken?
I mean, there's always room for improvement, certainly. I think we've gone a long way. I mean, I guess one thing I think could be improved is communication between students and the school board. I think there's been a bit of disparity between what students believe is best for students and what the school board believes is best for students. And I think kind of, I guess, improving that communication could certainly help students obtain help in better ways.
So in the final question, how can regular people, regular students who see these suicide clusters, how can they, help, combat this disease? How can they help their community?
I think the best way to help someone with depression is just to be there for them, to be open to why they are depressed, and that depression, as we've said, is not just a single thing or a single cause. That really accepting the person for being depressed and listening to them and allowing them to open up to you and being open to that.
Right. So like Mikaela said, I think just being open to your friends and family about the issue, lending an ear to them, and really listening to what they have to say and what they're feeling can be a great way for students to kind of talk about how they're feeling, and that will eventually allow them to seek help. I also think that just getting involved in programs around you, there are like so many mental health programs, and just like reaching out to those programs or getting involved in school programs, I think could be a great way for individuals to have an impact on mental health awareness.
All right. Well, that concludes our time. I thank the both of you for helping, for coming out to speak with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.